Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us for the JS Mindset Weekly Call. My name is Denny, and today is Saturday, November 23, 2019. Thanksgiving is next week. On the call today are the boys, Jim Sinclair, Bill Holter, and of course our Dave. Guys, the D.C. Circus Act has come to a close for a few days, and I'm not sure that the House of Representatives was shown in a very good light to a lot of Americans. We are a nation divided, and it might just be that we are divided purposely by somebody to keep us from paying attention to what has really been going on to us economically. Gold and silver are still doing what gold and silver have done for quite some time now, and that is they ain't doing much. And the only good news is that they're doing it at a higher level than they were last year. Day after day, week after week, the stock market continues to trek higher and higher, almost defying gravity. So it's good that we can meet up here on Saturday afternoon with the opportunity to listen to Jim, Bill, and Dave and to hear their reactions to what's been going on for the week, economically, politically, and certainly in the world. In the course of the conversation today, always remember we are not giving you investment advice. We're trying to give you another perspective of the economic world to add to your own perspective, just so you can be prepared for what might certainly be some very trying times ahead. As always, thanks for investing in the premium side of JS Mindset. There's always plenty of new postings, and the boys went crazy this week. I was getting 2 or 3 posts a day. Jim, I'm going to start with you today. Monetary policy today is like a terrible, contagious disease. And when the medical world deals with disease, you always look to some wonder drug or antibiotic that everybody can have access to. And yet, at least in the central bank world, when it comes to monetary policy, everybody's ignoring the real solution. Jim, if the real solution is continued to be ignored, won't that eventually sound the death knell for bad monetary policy?
The real solution, and I would say not even necessarily the real solution, but the textbook solution to a set of circumstances similar to what we have worldwide, is a method in monetary science that the environment simply cannot allow. If we went back towards a more standard method of management of money supply, and it would simply crater an economy built solely on credit. And with the national debt in such U.S. national debt and growing at the level it is, and with the U.S. economy okay in a sense, but not great at all, there is nothing that we can do but to keep this ship running in the direction it is. So the point is, it's a superbug that we have, not a common bug. And although science would certainly always be looking for a cure to the superbug, that cure in the economic science is nowhere in sight, nor is anybody looking. So the only thing left to do, because we are quantitatively easing everywhere, is to start creating more debt than even now and applying that debt to infrastructural builds or to the other kind of stimulation, direct economic activity stimulation. And I go back to the beginning. There simply isn't the type of market for debt, U.S. or otherwise, that it would allow us to go from monetary stimulation to fiscal stimulation. So more of this same Potemkin city called markets, but not forever. And the not forever was covered by all of Bill's articles on debt. Bill's article on value and worth, and I think there's a new sheriff in town, Bill. I think there's a new Mr. Gold. Congratulations.
David, I'd like your opinion and perception of how the people in your part of the United States are reacting to what's going on in Congress. I'm just going to call them the Schiff hearings in D.C. I've been asking what I consider normal people around me and in my daily course of work what they think. And I guess I'm sort of impressed with their perceptions of what is going on. They keep asking, I wonder what else is going on that they're diverting us to this. But Dave, I'm a Midwesterner. Dave, you're more of an East Coaster. How do you think John and Jane Q, East Coast, are reacting to the Schiff hearings?
Well, I don't think anybody's mind is really being changed from one side to the other. It's funny. I was picking up, I read the New York Times every day. I have it online, but I buy it in physical form because I like to read the paper. The reason I read the Times or the Washington Post is I consider them the mouthpiece of what I consider the deep state, the real people who run the country. They are the sanctioned newspaper. And, I have a buddy who reads the New York Post. The other day we happened to be in this little general store. I'm picking up the Times, he's picking up the New York Post, and you look at the headlines, and they each are interpreting what happened the day before 100% opposite of each other. And we're sitting here just kind of giggling and laughing at each other going, this is just daily entertainment, because while this is going on, there's much bigger things taking place on the planet, especially economically, that are not being covered the way they should be covered. And again, the American public they're addicted to reality TV. They're addicted to news stories. They're addicted to the moment, this is it, this is it, this is it. And if you look back at, some of the articles that I posted this week, I tried to show the listeners that, this has been going on for 40 years. This has been going on since the Kennedy assassination, that the public needs to be constantly distracted, because that allows the magician behind the curtain to continue to pull the levers that he's pulling. And let's use the stock market as an example. They can't let the stock market go down, because if the Dow started going down day after day after day after day, the way we all know it should be going, then you would create panic in the public. So what they do, as long as they can keep that stock market every day at new highs, just at a new high, up 1%, it allows the public to stay in their camps. And they're as divided as you said, Congress is, to the point where it's become, it's like a buddy of mine said the other day, people can't even talk to each other. There's this border in their brain where they're having a hard time deciphering information, because either they hate Trump or they love Trump. They hate Nancy, they love Nancy, or it is absolutely amazing. Because again, personally, I think most of what the Times prints is either a distortion of one type or another, getting the public to believe one thing or the other, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. If you go back to the audio of War of the Worlds, I think that taught the people who pull the levers that you can get the public to believe almost anything and get them to act hysterically about it. So you take what Congress is doing on a day-to-day basis, and this one said that, and then they said this, and, it's fodder for people's brains. And most people are so busy, and when I say so busy, Denny, you've run businesses. People who are trying to put food on the family, as George Bush used to say, because he wasn't smart enough to figure out the real sentence. It's tough to put food on the family. It just entertains them, because their days are so tough. They're trying to pay their bills. Their credit card bills are overwhelming. I watch people put everything on their credit card, and that's not really money, as Jim said. That's credit. And if that credit ever stopped flowing, for lack of a better word, like an antibiotic, the infection's going to kill them, and nobody wants to admit that they're infected. They want to believe that this party's going to go on forever.
They're dead already, David.
Exactly. Well, Bill, you and I have known that for over 20 years.
Yep.
We've watched this constant creation of money, and, it was like the story the other day. There's a listener named Kevin who I stay in pretty close contact with. The guy's definitely bright. We're talking about, he sent me the thing about Japanese dumping treasuries and Israel buying them, and I emailed them back, where do you think Israel's getting the money? Because they're not cash flush. Do you figure the Fed's just wire transferring it to Israel's account so that they could buy our bonds? I mean, who believes this? As Jim has said, whether it's coming from the Cayman Islands or whether it's coming from some other beard, we know in the end who's buying these bonds. And what made this even more interesting to think about is when you look at the negative bonds, we've all said, who in their right mind is going to buy 30-year paper where they guarantee to lose money? Well, nobody. What they're doing is they're trading them like baseball cards. Well, I'll buy these now, hoping to sell them to another sucker later just to keep this whole game moving. And, really that's what we're seeing now in America. The whole game is just trying to be kept on the railroad tracks because this train is headed into the station at full speed, and when it hits the end, it is going to be one ugly sucker.
And that's all over the world, Dave, just not the U.S.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely all over the world. And again, Bill, as you have said to your credit, China does have a debt bubble. But if you look at the high-speed trains in the cities they built, and then take a ride up and down the East Coast on our train system, tell me who's really done better things with the money.
Right.
I mean, at least at the end of the day, China's going to have trains that still go 300 miles an hour.
And we barely ours.
Right. Our trains could barely stay on the tracks. So, when this train comes off the track, as Jim said, this credit bubble is going to hurt everybody.
Bill, I've got some research for you. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
I just wanted to add a thought. Some listeners have a hard time with the reality of the beards that act for the U.S. Financial interest. But go back a step, because Bernanke made a huge mistake when he informed us that he could create any amount of money simply by a computer entry. What he was telling us is the money to buy the bonds is created by the transaction and all happens simultaneously. Therefore, the money for Israel to buy U.S. bonds is created by Israel buying U.S. bonds, which is a computer entry at the same time that creates the money in the U.S. To make the transfer. This stuff doesn't exist, guys. It's in cyberspace, all right? And Bernanke absolutely and utterly, it was part of the helicopter speech, but when he said that there was no problem whatsoever in creating any degree of money supply that was desired, he took it in a vacuum, meaning that the world stayed out of a panic state, and there were still people who were believers. But the actual transaction is an instantaneous wash sale that creates the money. A wash sale is defined as buyer and seller to each other. So there is a transaction, except it's an agreement between two and instantly, and as a result now, creates on the various books and ledgers the money supply and the outstanding bonds. You don't have to have the money first to buy the treasuries. Very important thing to think about.
That's a good point.
It's unending, and therefore the supply of money is infinite. The value of money, or the worth of money, may be a different argument, but the amount of money is infinite. And that also brings my mind back to something I think we should take a look at today, and that's the change in cut that you were discussing, Bill and Dave, last week. We should revisit it a little bit. Over and out.
Bill, I'm going to tip you up to bring you up to speed on some research that shows that Americans are listening to more music stations now on their car radios. Well, you guys know that I do radio, and for the last 15 years, music stations, that has not been the case, as listeners have tuned into talk radio for almost 24 hours of nonstop opinion blathering. Even in my own family, those who have been addicted to talk radio and the 24-hour media news cycle, they've now turned back to the music station, and they've just had enough. Now, Bill, that's the research, that's the evidence. But as a very astute observer, what do you think this is going to mean? What does all this mean? If we're turning away from talk radio and the talk news cycle and going back to music, Have Americans finally just said, to hell with this, I'm turning it off? What do you think, Bill?
They're totally burned out. Whether they're on the left, on the right, in the middle, they're burned out. It's information overload. For people who can actually add 2 plus 2 and do logic, what's being talked about is complete stupidity, because 2 plus 2 never equals 4. And what Dave was talking about before, people try to put food on the table. They need to take a break and shut their brain down, because they're being bombarded with just sensational information every day. They're being bombarded with things that can't even possibly be every day. It's total burnout, and people are walking away from it for their own sanity.
Jim, of all my friends,
Merle Haggard or Nancy?
Jim, of all my friends, you are more of an expert on Africa and its potential than anybody I know. It has been said that this is the century that will bring great growth to all parts of Africa. Jim, is it because of the vast resources in Africa? Is it about the growing population? Is it the lack of infrastructure? First of all, do you agree with that the next 80 years are really going to be great for Africa, and why?
Well, I wrote the book on what I saw as visions of opportunity in the next century, in 1995, for the century we're in now. And I specialized in three areas. One was China, the other was Russia, the third was India and Africa. And of those three, we've seen the emergence of those four. We've seen the emergence of three areas. Africa has not really moved solidly forward in a financial sense. The reason why was colonialism taught corruption. Under the colonial system, you bought your opportunities, and you bought them at a very, very cheap price. $50,000 would have bought you billions of dollars worth of resources. And they have the resources there now, and they have various people who are showing the signs of legitimate financial understanding and anti-corruption initiatives. Now, I think there's two things. Africa is going to move, because of that, significantly forward. They have a potential market themselves, just as India had a huge market. China has a huge market. So really does Africa. When I came to Tanzania, we were talking 30 million population. Now we're talking 60 million plus. We're talking the improvement of educational value. We're talking improvement of quality of health care. Yes, you're right. Africa will move ahead. Now, but Africa will be, as in a sense, somewhat like China and somewhat like India, society to itself. And that it's not going to be something that people dealing in Africa or with African experience are really going to be able to act in and prosper in, just as I won't go near China because I can't understand. I just don't understand these people. India has its own character and personality, and I have a home there, and it's unusual. And success in India is not easy if you're not a landsman. So, because of the fact that there are Magufuli types, because of the fact there are strong men with right reasoning, because there is superb wealth, because gold is being considered by many countries and taken on as a reserve asset by many countries in Africa, because the leakage of wealth out of Africa in the form of gold to the Middle East to finance the revolutionary and wild men there, that's being plugged, and that was what really the artisanal move was all about, and it is huge. So, if you take into consideration that they're actually creating currencies with gold reserves, common currencies that have a means of exit. That's a common currency that will work. In other words, the problem that the euro did, they created, but they never made a road out in case a road out was required. So out of the euro in any form is a crisis of some form. Africa's learned from this. So if you understand and are willing to deal with the culture of Africa, which is unusual, the opportunity outside of the resources is also tremendous. People start wearing shoes. They want nice hats, okay? They want to be able to have vehicles. And, on and on it goes. The minute that they have the availability to do it, and bear in mind that all African governments have ignorantly accepted huge debts to China, and China has stolen some very serious things like ports, facilities, railroads, by calling that debt. The average African has no debt, which means the average African has a tremendous capacity in the future for consumption. And when you're looking around the world for opportunities, if you'll understand that capitalism as we understand it cannot be practiced in an area that was agrarian socialist 20 years ago, but free markets can, you can garner that opportunity, and that is presently the greatest opportunity on the planet.
David, I told you I was going to pitch something underhand to you. This is it. On my laptop, I keep a piece of tape over the built-in camera on the lid, and it's labeled camera cover. Dave, I had to take the laptop in for a bit of service last week, and this 30-something tech who helped me work on the computer saw that, and he gave me the strangest look, and he didn't even have to say it, but I got the very distinct feeling that he thought I was nuts. I guess there's not too many of us suspicious types out there anymore, and the lure of technology is really hard to overcome. So, Dave, this is the underhand pitch. Are we building our own jails and gallows with our use and dependence on this wonderful technology?
Absolutely, 100%. I saw somebody call out Facebook the other day, Mark Zuckerberg, on just this topic. I have friends who just continually, I, like Bill, have been on this for well over 20 years, going back to when I was a kid. And without getting into it in depth, I've known everything is tapped. Everything. And after years and years and years and years and years of people telling me that I was a complete knucklehead, retard, conspiracy theorist, they've now resorted to, well, I have nothing to hide. And I say, how do you know what they're looking for to know what to hide? And I'll use as an example, there's all kinds of bioresearch labs all over the world. And let's just use, we know for a fact that the military has been trying to figure out the DNA of every Russian and probably everybody on the planet, because then they could turn around and create a virus that will only attack certain people with certain characteristics. So, well, I have nothing to hide. Well, then send your DNA to 23andMe. And it goes so much deeper than that, because they gave us this tech because it was going to allow them to spy on us. DARPA invented the touchpad years and years and years and years and years ago. Al Gore did not invent the Internet. I'm sorry to say, DARPA invented the Internet. They knew exactly what they were doing when they gave it to us. They said it's going to be this great thing. And then it morphed into the cloud. Our stuff is in the cloud. My pictures are in the cloud. Where is the cloud? Are you eating acid in the cloud? The cloud is where? It's in their hands. because all these tech companies obviously are in bed with the government. As I've read so many times, programs don't go away that the military or the CIA or NSA create. They get morphed into civilian programs where people are not afraid of them. If the military was behind Facebook, nobody would be on Facebook. They had Facebook long before it was Facebook. I brought this up. They packaged that up, turned it into Facebook, and everybody willingly has put their whole life story out there. Denny, I am so convinced that the public has entrapped themselves and continue to do so through the use of electronics for their checking accounts, for their bank accounts, for their credit cards. I am so against that. I always carry cash. I try never to do anything that leaves a trail. Not that I have anything to hide. I just am not willingly going to make your job easier to corral me. Think of like wild horses out west. They think they're running around free. The helicopters rounding them up, pushing them into the valley. Next thing you know, the gates slammed and they're just trapped. To think that that technique is not being used on us as citizens is utterly foolish. And yes, my wife has covered my camera with duct tape forever. The problem is I don't think that helps anymore. I think they have the ability to listen to us 24/7, and anybody who has seen the demos run where people take the smartphones, take the SIM cards out, shut them off, drive around town, go here, go there, go here, go there, and then to find out that they were spied on anyway. All of these devices are to our own demise. When we were all farmers and hunter-gatherers, they had no ability to corral us and control us. We have willingly given them the ability. They know what TV shows you watch. They have an algorithm that knows more about you than you know about yourself. And as we watch this cashless society develop, we're going to be totally trapped because they will be able to turn you on or off. They will be able to tell exactly where you spend your money. They will be able to tell if you have any money that you're spending that hasn't been accounted for. And unfortunately, as this economy collapses, which we are all in agreement is going to happen, that is when they will slam this trapdoor shut, and they'll say they're doing it because Iran attacked us, North Korea attacked us, because the terrorists are using cryptocurrency. Yeah, it's going to be to save us from ourselves. Bill, why don't you pick up on this, because you and I have been the conspiracy theorists for well over 20 years now.
Can I put one in the middle to make it a little more interesting for you, Bill? Just a quick one. There's a fellow by the name of Ronald Hubbard, and he wrote Dianetics. And that was the foundational book for the Church of Scientology, which generally is considered in the media as, real strange. But they carry a belief that an individual who could advance himself enough on what we call spiritual level, but what really is called the operation of our mind, would be able to determine when this suit of clothes we wear called our body wears out, that we can determine who we will come back as, and will direct all of our assets to that individual. Just let's take a look at that, and then remember that the Bilderbergers, Illuminati, are all organizations not too far off the thing that Hubbard started. But of course, no one puts two and two together and realizes that's why armed guards surround the buildings, because very, very unusual things take place in there. So everybody says, well, why will people do this? They're going to die and spend their whole life to control society, and that's it. Bing, you're dead. And someone else in Skull and Bones is going to take over? No. They've got the idea that they can stay here as whomever they desire to be. Oh, that sounds pretty nuts. That sounds a little bit like sci-fi gone nuts. But there's a lot of people who follow Hubbard and, in fact, really do believe it. So look at the fact that they have a mindset that if you're invited into the club, or you work your way to the club, or you're born in the club, you're immortal. So now have the argument. I'm just giving you the why they do what they do.
That's like the elite thought process right there.
That is the elite thought process. Yes, that's quite correct. In other words, they have a reason for doing this. A reason for this control is they never intend to give up control.
Dave, how many people have you gotten emails or phone calls from saying, wow, you were right 20 years ago?
None. Actually, I shouldn't say
and we'll never ever get any. I mean, here we are, 20 plus years, and I say plus years because you got to go back to cell phones and when computers first started. The whole thing is, it's been information gathering, and what they've done is they've used man's vanity, if you will. My life's better than yours. Look at what I'm doing on Facebook. I mean, people willingly are giving up information. Take, for instance, here's a perfect example. Take, for instance, somebody who smokes or somebody who drinks. And you go to the store and you legally buy cigarettes or you buy liquor and you pay for it with a credit card. And 2 years from now, all of a sudden, a mass wave hits the country and cigarettes are absolutely illegal, or liquor is absolutely illegal.
Or vaping.
Yeah, exactly, currently. What I'm getting at is there's a paper trail, and don't think that they can't or won't pass a law that's retroactive and says, oh, well, if you smoked ever in your life, and we know you did, you can never get health insurance, and you can't even go to a hospital because it's your own fault.
Medical records. How about that?
Yeah, exactly.
Medical records.
But my point...
to be used against you in getting a job. Or how about the human genome, which was considered to be 99% garbage, with only about 5 or 6 points for true identification. Now they've discovered the 99% garbage is not garbage, but on-off switches. And you talk about giving up your personal DNA. There's more than DNA, and there's more use than they can make of it. Go Manchurian Candidate via the garbage part of the human genome.
All right.
Yeah, and who knows where that'll come from, Jim? I mean, the on-off switch, it could be 5G. It could be 6G, whatever. I mean, it could be anything. It could be something
I think
in the water.
I know you're speaking lightly, but I think you're actually telling the truth. I think it is 5G.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, Epstein killed himself by breaking his thorax? Come on.
I forgot to put that in my article yesterday. I meant to put that in there somewhere.
Let me get the train back on the track. Bill, I'm going to you. In a lot of ways, you are my crystal ball on certain forecasts. Christine Lagarde is the new head of the ECB, the European Central Bank, and she strongly hinted that ECB would step in and start buying stocks, adding them to the balance sheet. Now, Japan's done this, Switzerland has done this, and I suppose it's going on
Norway's
everywhere.
Done it.
Yeah. What's the future of the market look like in a few months, and what's the future look like in a few years if this is going on and for whatever reason stops or accelerates? Give me some timing of how things are going to play out with all the ECB or all of the central banks doing this stuff, Bill.
Okay. First, I got a title for an article I want to do next week. You cannot price or time fraud. So with that being said, I can't give you any timelines because who knows? We should have collapsed several years ago. But first off, her suggesting they might do it, they will do it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it because the average person looks at the stock market. So if everything was solid in credit, which is not, but if everything was solid in credit and we had visible stock market problems, then you'd have an unruly public. So they have to keep the stock market. They have to keep it up. They cannot let it collapse. And one way to do that is just to buy stocks directly. The problem with doing that is now you have stocks as part of the foundation backing money, which is completely ass backwards. I mean, you've got fake money that's backed by something that is fraudulently priced and fraudulently priced by the issuer of that money. So what it does is it goes directly to destroying the purchasing power of the currencies of whoever's doing the buying of stocks. Because the long-term question is, who do they sell to?
May I have 1 minute on that, because I think what you said is outrageously important. Bill, what I see happening is adding the characteristic of infinity to more than QE. When you can create money out of thin air, you can create as much as you want through cyberspace. When governments will be using that type of money creation to purchase securities when there is no capital available, when you begin to hypothecate gold as many times as you care to against a contract which in the first place doesn't have gold, and this is not that's not a pro-gold argument, but the argument you made was 100% correct. All of these things can have a value, but the real, I won't use value a word, the intrinsic reality that makes anything historically utilitarian is that entity which maintains buying power. So as you move to create a forever stock market of a Potemkin kind, or a forever somewhat higher but not wildly higher gold market, and the ability to create any kind of monetary amount you wish to inject, you depreciate in all those cases, not gold, the ability of functionality of going over time and maintaining buying power. So you just made an argument there that is worth putting you down in the books of Ricardo and Smith as to why the present can't continue.
Well, it goes back to my article.
I
have a price,
but
it doesn't necessarily have a value.
Well, you put into very simple words outrageously complex considerations. I congratulate you. That's a fabulous ability. I live in a place that ends up putting anybody in confusion because I know what this is all about. I really do. And when I hear you present it in practicality, okay, then you become Mr. Practicality, which is Mr. Gold.
Well, David
and
was the original
that's a fabulous
translator.
talent. Fabulous talent, okay? I know this stuff, but you speak it. Congratulations.
One interjection here, too, guys. If they say they're going to do it, they're already
done it.
They're already done it. I mean, this is just a way of weaning you onto the idea. I mean, why would you bring that up if you weren't already doing it?
They just want to see if anybody's going to go crazy. And since nobody went crazy, now they'll say, yep, we're going to do it, even though they already have.
Exactly.
Put together two concepts while you're at it. A book written by Tesla, the real one, the greatest scientist, I believe, that has ever existed, called The Body Electric. Okay? Put that together with G5, and then study about human genome garbage, and you've got total control.
Yeah, if you go outside of your house, you get shut down at their
whim. Somebody can run you. Okay, you become, in other words, a nation of Manchurian candidates.
We've got about 20 minutes to go, and I want to cover just a little bit more territory. Jim, I want to go back to the mining industry. there has been a depression in those that supply the mining industry.
Yes,
so you have been watching this pretty carefully, if not for your own benefit, but also just as a scholar. What's the condition of the industry that supplies miners right now? How are the plant manufacturers, the heavy equipment folks, the conveyor folks, the refiners, the road builders, how are those industries doing? Are they coming out of it, or are they still struggling?
Consolidating, not coming out of it. At this point, there has been a consolidation of the what you would call the gold standard, the high standard of the various methods and sciences required to identify any and all resources. And you've ended up with companies like SGS Bateman, who have acquired most all of the best that's out there. From the beginning of exploration to the finality of production as a one-house concern, and have diversified into general infrastructural building in order to maintain some degree of cash flow. So what all this means is that this industry, with any given recovery to the prices of resources, will not be a widespread prosperity, but rather a world of majors. Maybe there'll be 5 who build, maybe there'll be 25 major resource companies. There will be no explorers, none whatsoever. That industry has had it. And it is another industry historically under control of the oldest, wealthiest European names.
David
figured it out, and they went in the direction of success.
David, Congress has passed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act of 2019. This will supposedly not hurt the Phase 1 trade negotiations between Xi and Trump, because the Chinese now believe that Trump's going to get reelected. But there's a lot of symbolism going on here both ways, Dave, including the fact that absolutely no politician wants to be seen as soft on China, and China wants to show righteous indignation to its populace. Dave, Trump's going to sign the bill, but what will certainly... Well, I guess I'll take a different tack. What will this really mean in the whole scheme of things with our relationship of China? Is this just theater?
No, it's not theater.
Add Huawei in there, David.
Say again?
Add Huawei in there.
Well, right.
They've been declined.
Right. Well, it's not theater, Denny. This is economic warfare, and it's not going away. And I truly believe we are going to lose this battle. And I had a conversation with somebody the other day over this Hong Kong thing. I mean, you're looking at these kids throwing rocks, fire bombs, shooting arrows at the cops. And I sent him the history of, and Denny, you're of this era. Remember Kent State?
Oh, God, yes.
Remember Kent State? Really? And we're going to lecture another country, Hong Kong, on how to deal with riots? Do you remember Occupy Wall Street? Do you remember Waco? Do you remember Ruby Ridge? I mean, I could go on for an hour and a half. Who is Congress to lecture anybody on how to deal with protests and human rights? This is strictly economic warfare, and I don't see China blinking at all. They will play their cards like a professional poker player. Because, again, as I have pointed out, in over so many posts, China has made trading partners while for the last 10 years, while we've done nothing but burnt out one country after another. Bolivia, just use Bolivia as an example. Bolivia, no matter what anybody thinks about what happened there, I've sent you guys enough articles. Lithium is what this was all about.
Yes.
Germany and China were getting a bulk of lithium. Bolivia has roughly 60% of the world's lithium reserves. All the electric cars, all your batteries in your drills, all your batteries in your cell phones, it's all lithium. But aside from all of that, in Bolivia, I mean, they are shooting peasants like they were pheasants. is the best way to put it. And these peasants who are being shot, 20, 30, 40, 50 dead, who even knows what the number is, nobody gives a crap. If I see the Hong Kong headline one more time, I mean, the New York Times, every single day I say to the wife, look at this. They are the mouthpiece of the deep state. Today, Saturday's paper, they must have a 15-page expose on Hong Kong and who the Hong Kong protesters are. They're trying to show you that they're just not students, they're everyday people. And the other day, they had the whining mothers, oh, my children are locked in the school and can't get out. Your children are little criminals. If they did that in the United States, we would send in the SWAT team and swat them like flies on the wall, and it would be over in 15 minutes. Now, I'm not saying China's a good guy. I'm not saying Hong Kong's a good guy. I am the last person in the world to stand behind authority or cops and say they're being reasonable. But from what I have seen in independent analysis, the Hong Kong police have gone so far out of their way to not do what France has done in the yellow vest protest, which is basically smoke anybody they want to smoke. Israel, they've shot over 1,000 Palestinians who never stepped a foot on their country. So, no, this is the United States. This is what Congress is. They're a criminal organization. They should all be charged under the RICO Act. They do nothing but protect large corporations who they hope to go to work for and continue to get lobby money from. And let's be honest, what is lobby money? It's bribe money, is it not? Honest to God, guys, is lobby money bribe money, yes or no?
Absolutely.
Yes, it is.
So of course they're going to do the bidding of our corporations. Nobody's going to say anything bad about an American corporation, not in real sense, not in a real sense, because they ultimately get their cash to stay in office from corporations. They don't get it from me, Jim, Denny, or Bill. They get it from the defense contractors. They get it from the pharmaceutical contractors. They get it from the banking industry, and that is who they're going to protect. And if that means attacking China on a daily basis, this is for all the marbles. The Sacker did a great analysis of Russia, China, and Iran's alliance, and I was going to post it, but I keep getting this even from my friends. Oh, you're a Russian apologist. I'm not anybody's apologist. I'm not on anybody's side. I'm on the side of the facts. That's my whole thing in life. I want to independently analyze things and call out people who I think are doing the right thing and people who are doing the wrong thing. And here in the United States, Congress is a bunch of bought and paid for criminals. Criminals. The RICO Act should be used to put them all out of business. Unfortunately, it's never going to happen short of a full-on, and a revolution wouldn't work because the power of our military and police force is just too strong now. We cannot defeat them that way. The only way to defeat them is going to be overthrow them at the ballot box, and that would mean all of them. Throw all the bums out and start over. Unfortunately, that's the only way I see it because Congress is in the pocket of big business. Go back and read what Smedley Butler said. It hasn't changed, has it?
And Dave, that can't be done because we don't count the votes.
Well, and again,
it's
we don't
whoever
even know
counts the votes.
Right, we don't even know how our voting systems work. They're all electronic. I forwarded you guys the articles during the week, and Bill, you posted the articles about the Democrats rigging, just making up voters. Well, and again, look at Karl Rove's IT man. He was going to testify.
Ohio.
He's dead. Ohio. I mean, so if it happened there, it's happening everywhere. Everything is rigged. The financial markets, everything we know is rigged. And and as we said earlier, they're using our electronic devices to just pigeonhole us to where eventually they're going to shoot us like pheasants at a pheasant hunt. And Denny, I don't know if you've ever seen one of them, but it's not.
I've been oh yeah, pheasant hunts. That's Midwest stuff, buddy.
Absolutely.
Hey, Dave, let me add to that because I talked about this as far back as 4 or even 5 years ago, when it looked like China was really starting to import a lot of gold, which means they've increased their gold reserves. At this point, and back then I was using the number of 20,000 tons. So, I mean, maybe the number's 30 or 40,000 tons now. this being economic warfare, China could simply take their gold reserves, put them at the center field of their national stadium, and say, see, here's our gold. We showed you ours. Now you show us yours. And that would be the game over event.
Size counts.
Got two more questions. Bill, I'm going to give you the first one. And you and I talked about it this week, and I still think that everybody needs to understand a specific concept. In evaluating different companies for investments.
Should I look up in the sky while I'm answering this question?
You know where I'm going with this one because I rode you like a rented mule. All right, so the typical investor looks at growth, looks at cost of goods sold, gross margin, internal rates of return, and the available markets available to a company, and they decide whether or not the balance sheet and everything, if they're going to invest in it. Now, I get it. I understand that. That's what I've worked on for nearly 50 years now. But, Bill, what I do not understand is the concept called blue sky. Can you explain to us what is meant by blue sky when it comes to investments?
Look up.
Well, I'm looking up. It's raining here, pal.
Okay. Jim, I need your permission because I'd like to use TRX hypothetically to talk about.
Go for it, Mr. G.
Okay.
Go for it.
All right. So the 43101 that TRX has out, I believe, has 1.1 million ounces of mineable reserves at Buck Reef. And in the last year, well, this year, it's been drill, baby, drill. And the drill results, as far as I can see, have been excellent. They've gone deeper, they've gone wider, and as they've gone deeper and wider, they're richer. They also discovered that the pit, what was defined as the pit in the 43101, now has an extension of about 1.2 kilometers long. That's blue sky. In other words, it's not down in black and white on a 43101 that the pit, which in the 43101 is 240 meters deep, it's 43101 has not been updated showing that the pit now should be, call it 450 meters deep instead of 240. And it also doesn't reflect the fact that the pit has an extension from it that's 1.2 kilometers long. And, at the same depth as the rest of the pit. So you're sharpening your pencil and you're using 1.1 million ounces, dividing it into the amount of shares outstanding, taking the cost of production, you're taking Tanzania's cut taxes, and you get a number, and you're saying, well, the stock has a net present value of X. But what you're not taking into account is there's a hell of a lot more gold in the ground. Now, that's, if you want to call that initial blue sky. But what's below that? What's below 800, 900 meters? Where is the mother lode? What happens to your financial calculations if and when you hit the mother lode? That's blue sky. Blue sky is, you could say that it's using your imagination, but in this particular instance, you're not using your imagination because you've already seen the drill results.
So blue sky is the logical recalculation of new facts?
Yes, and what could be.
All right.
In other words,
thank you.
And what could be? What happens if, they've only drilled down 900 meters? What happens if they go to 1,200 or 1,500 meters?
Like Bulyanhulu. Yeah,
right,
okay.
Does it get wider, richer? I mean, Jim, you started Bulyanhulu, and you were never in your wildest dreams thinking it was going to be a 20 million ounce deposit.
We had hopes of 10.
Yeah.
Okay? We had high hopes of 10.
And now it's double that. So
now it's at 25.
It's still open. Okay? It's open to depth.
So there is
not
no
closed
blue
off,
sky
I
with
believe.
the Bullion Hulu.
It's so open to depth, it's being mined by robots.
All right, so that leads me to the last question. Great White Father Jim.
So,
Great fortunes have been made at different times in the history of the United States, really in the world. In the United States, the railroads and those who invested in them made tremendous wealth in the 1800s. Oil and natural gas made a few families incredibly wealthy. The steel industry and manufacturing also made great wealth for those who were at the beginning, the early adopters. Then came the digital world and the early adopters of things like Microsoft and Apple and Amazon, cable TVs, so, on and on. Jim, in my own mind, I have to believe that great wealth awaits those who invest in the mining of precious metals right now, because there's just not that much. I don't see any viable mines in numbers. And I don't want to talk in hyperbole here, but I believe it'll be wealth of unbelievable proportion to those great investments of the last couple of centuries. You got any thoughts?
Yeah, you've got to add changes in use and utility, especially on the side of silver, and as well on the side of gold. So what you're looking at and what you're explaining to me is that all of what's happening now economically has a limitation, as infinity is a concept only. It's not, just not real when it comes to economics, and it's all coming down someday, regardless of whether or not it remains a hard thing to see as a Potemkin city. But it will have a real result, and that real result will be in the area of resources. So you might see an economy captured by technology, but take a look at what technology is using and think about your recent comment on Bolivia, okay? And think of the gold and silver use as they expand, as well as their capacity from the beginning of known history to have a strange characteristic of remaining as a storehouse of wealth. So, and then look at the real money, which is old European money, and realize that you can hypothecate and hypothecate by rehypothecation of gold, but you can't create the gold itself. That alchemy doesn't work. So your analysis is absolutely correct. And then what you do is destroy an industry to the degree that you wipe out from 3,000 and change to in the area below 500 of exploration companies that exist, and that all the other companies in the business, supplying, making, constructing, operating, managing, etc., consolidate, and then consider owning those few companies that have consolidated, and you have the new road to wealth. You made it happen. You created it. You constructed it. You will benefit from it.
It's certainly a huge funnel that has come from the 3,000 exploratory enterprises down to 500. I keep laughing because one of my favorite movies of all time was about Bolivia. Remember Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? They ran to Bolivia.
I love it.
I love it too. Well, boys, that's everything. Dave, I'll go to you first. You got anything else you want to share with us before we say goodbye?
No, Denny, I think we pretty much covered everything this week, and I tell everybody have a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's upon us. Hey, Bill, how about you?
I think our talk today was probably the most intellectual we've been. Epstein didn't kill himself, and have a happy Thanksgiving.
Hey, one more thing. You're going to do a complete autopsy on how many turkeys. You always go to the mission to do your turkeys. How many turkeys are you going to have, and how long does it take you?
I'm thinking it's 9 turkeys and 3 hams. As long as the turkeys are not boiling hot and just out of the oven or just out of the fryer, I can do a turkey in roughly 5 minutes flat. Strip it to the bone.
Now, how high can you shoot it out of the frozen one out of the hot oil?
Yeah. Well, was it that Les Nessman said, "As God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly."
Yeah.
They can. Watch.
Yeah. All right, Jim, you're the last one.
Frozen turkey in a fryer, you'll see it fly.
Oh, that's true. Jim, have you got anything else for us?
Yeah, I can tell you, the older you get, the more refined becomes that which you enjoy. And you guys make my week. Thank you.
Jim, you're a precious treasure. You share your knowledge. You always have. You're generous with your thoughts and your opinions. You're a national treasure. I just hope the world finds you someday. Okay?
I don't know. A man in India once said, "I grant you a long, long life," and with that started to laugh like mad.
All right. Well, happy Thanksgiving. Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you next week.
You got it, guys. Thanks again. Bye-bye.